Hello, hello, and welcome back to another Premium Customer Workshop. Really excited to have you here today. We're going to be going over some really exciting stuff using MCP connectors to connect a JIRA roadmap to your Bolt project. So welcome back to all of you who've joined us before. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. There's plenty of stuff we're going to be covering in this workshop. It's not just specifically for the JIRA workflows, but anything MCP connector related we'll be going over. So joining us on the call, we have Erica. She's one of our customer success engineers. So thanks for joining us, Erica. She will be answering any of the questions that you have. You can see on the right-hand side that there's a option to leave comments. Feel free, while we're still waiting for people to join us and we're just getting started, feel free to introduce yourselves there, maybe where you're calling in from. If you also have a project that you're working on that you'd like to share with the community, feel free to drop a link in there. My name's William Sayer, the Customer Enablement Lead at Bolt. So you've probably seen me on the YouTube channel and stuff like that. So welcome back. And yeah, really excited to get started today. What I'll do is I'll bring up the slideshow. So here we have the PowerPoint presentation, and this is what we'll be working on. We'll be bringing our JIRA roadmap items into Bolt, and we're going to build directly using the JIRA MCP connector. So for those of you who aren't familiar with MCP, it stands for Model Context Protocol. It's this protocol that was invented by Anthropic. I think it was released maybe January last year. And it's a fantastic way that you can bring context from other platforms into your Bolt agent, and then your Bolt agent can use that context while it's building out your Bolt project. Great. So I see we've got Oren Jackson introducing themselves in the chat. Welcome. They've got their project there as well. So everybody else, you're welcome to introduce yourselves if you'd like. Now, I think it's almost time to get started. Just as a little bit of housekeeping, for those of you who've joined us, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but if you've got a question, as I said, feel free to put it in the comments on the right. Erica will either do her best to answer it directly in the comments, or if it's relevant to what we're doing at the time, she'll display it on the screen and I'll do my best to answer it. So with that, I think it's just about time to get started. So here we are. Let's go to the next slide. So what's the problem that we're facing? So basically, your team, usually if you're working in like a software team, you'll usually track the work that you need to do in a tool like JIRA or Linear or another project management system. But bringing that context into Bolt, it usually means that you may have copy and paste chaos. So I'm manually copying these ticket details, the descriptions, the acceptance criteria, the priority, the person it's been assigned to. There's often a whole variety of properties that are within these tickets in your project management system. And so bringing all of those across can often be confusing. It can take a little bit of time, and often it can be prone to errors. So that's exactly what we're addressing in workflow that we'll be covering like this. Also rewriting the requirements, so translating these well-defined tickets into prompts from scratch every time can be difficult. So we'll be going over a best practice to address that. Obviously tab juggling, going back and forth between the tools, and you risk the chance of losing the context. So if you copy maybe 5 out of the 6 properties across, but maybe you don't remember to bring the priority. And so, or you don't bring the assignee or the description or the acceptance criteria, you may not bring that over into the Bolt agent. And so we're going to be addressing all of these with the workflow that we'll be going over today. So what are the outcomes of today's workshop? So by the end of this session, you will understand how to bring this context into Bolt from your project management tool without the manual copy and paste. We'll turn these workflow items into strong prompts, how to translate the JIRA or Linear tickets into a real product context. Then we'll guide these builds with the goals and acceptance criteria, and we'll be using plan mode in Bolt to help build this out. And ultimately, we'll be moving faster so that we can take items from your backlog and then push them into production in your prototype. The skills we'll cover, we'll be going over connectors. That's the main one. If we have time, we'll also touch on some other connectors such as Notion or Granola as well. And we'll see actually how we can connect not just our JIRA connector, but also some other connectors and really supercharge that workflow, bringing information from all these different platforms. We'll be doing product planning. We'll be going over some prompting techniques, our workflow design, and then also basically just general. So with that, here's the workflow that we're going to be covering. So think of our starting point as we've got a source of truth, and that's in our project tracker, such as JIRA, Linear, whatever it may be. Now, the beautiful thing about having this source of truth in an external tool like this is, for one, these tools such as JIRA is designed explicitly to act as this source of truth. It makes it easy for everybody in your organization to add tickets within your project management software. So whether it's somebody from customer success, it could be somebody who's on the ground regularly talking to your customers. It could be anybody in your organization who hears some feedback. But it's really easy for them to add tickets into this software. And then it's usually only the developers who are the ones who act on this. So by effectively opening the bucket to everybody so that they can put in these issues and these tickets, you're now giving effectively everyone in your organization the ability to contribute to the product roadmap. So the next step is we're connecting our connectors using MCP, and that's our way to bring in this information from this software into Bolt. And then finally, we're going to use that information to craft a really good prompt. And then with that prompt, once we're happy with that, we're then going to build it out within Bolt. So that's the workflow we'll be covering. Great. Okay, so let's look at our initial prompt in Bolt. What we're here we go. So build a simple internal candidate management tool for tracking job applicants through our hiring pipeline. The app should have a dashboard showing all candidates in a Kanban style board with stages: applied, the phone screen process, interview, offer, hired, and rejected. Each candidate card should show their name, the role they applied for, and the current stage. Keep the design clean and professional with a sidebar nav. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy all of this. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm having issues copying that. Let me just come down here. I'm going to have to copy it from here. Here we go. Okay. And I'm going to take that prompt over and let's put this into Bolt. So let's paste that in Bolt. There we have our initial prompt. I'm going to change it over to our max model. Let's put it into plan mode. And now let's generate our plan. Okay, so we'll give that a minute or two to spit that out. So just to provide a little bit more context into what we're building is, imagine we are struggling to manage candidates that are applying for jobs in our company. We want to build an internal tool that basically helps us manage all of these applicants internally. So that's effectively the use case that we're going for. So coming back into our Bolt project, we're just going to let this plan out, and this will probably take a minute or two. While that's doing its thing, what I'm going to do is let's just jump over and we're going to quickly go over what JIRA is. Some of you may have heard of JIRA before by a company called Atlassian. So basically, it's one of the most widely used project management and issue tracking tools in software development. It effectively teams can plan, track, and manage work through the customizable boards and workflows, and work is organized into projects with tickets that move through stages from backlog to done. Who uses it? So it's super popular amongst software teams, engineers, product managers, designers, QA organizations of all sizes, from startups to enterprises like Spotify, Airbnb, and NASA. And then why it matters. So JIRA tickets contain the requirements, acceptance criteria, design nodes, etc. And Bolt pulls this context directly into your prompts. So some of the key concepts that you'll want to know when using JIRA is that we've got projects, which is the containers for the work. We've got the issues and the tickets, which are the units of work in particular. We've got boards, so Kanban or Scrum views, and you can move tickets from these different boards, effectively changing their status. Workflows, we're not really going to be touching on that. And then epics and stories is basically kind of like a larger hierarchy of each of these projects and tickets. So I imagine we've probably got some founders, or we may have some entrepreneurs who are on this call. Feel free, if you don't have a project management tool set up, feel free to kind of follow along while I go through setting up the JIRA process. It's not going to take too long, so I'm just going to search for JIRA. We're going to the official site, and notice it's already bringing me back into my workflow. If you have not set up a JIRA account, you should just search for JIRA. It's free to create an account, so go in, spend a minute or two, just create an account, and then you'll see a process like this, and you'll be asked to set up a workspace like this. So once you have your workspace set up, I'm going to go to JIRA. And this is effectively what you'll see once you've created your account. So you can see we've got our workspace here. I've called it workshop test. We've got our different statuses. So we've got to do, in progress, in review, and done. And so, for example, let's say we want to add an advanced filter to the candidates page. That's an example of a ticket. We just create it like so. Now, when I notice that it gives it a unique identifier, so this is Can 10. Now, if I click on this ticket itself, it has a description, so we can elaborate on the task itself. We can add subtasks. We can play around with agents as well. We can assign it to ourselves if we want, and we can choose the priority as well, plus a whole variety of other things. Let's say our due date. We're going to say our due date is today, for example. So there we go. Just like that, we've been able to add our very first JIRA ticket. Let's come back into our Bolt project and see where the plan is. Okay, it's created a 10-step plan for our project. Now, let's just double check it's not asking any clarifying questions at the top. No, it's not. Normally, it's best practice to read through all of these, but just for the sake of time, it usually does a pretty good job. So I'm just going to brush right past it. Now, let's click implement this plan, and we're going to let Bolt start building out this project. Okay. Now, that'll take 5 minutes or so. So while that's working, what we can do is let's go ahead, and now we're going to set up our connector. So jumping back in here, oops, let me jump through. So here we are, setting up the JIRA connector. Before Bolt can pull context from JIRA, you need to authorize the connection through your Atlassian admin settings. So first is we're going to go to our admin on our Atlassian page. So basically, let's come into where are we? Here we are in our JIRA board. Now to go to our admin, just simply come up to the very top left here. We're going to go to home. On our home page, you can see, let's click view all apps. Here we have administration. So click on administration. Notice the domain is simply admin.atlassian.com. And so inside here, what we're going to do is, I think it's in, where is it? Sorry, here, Rovo. So come click on Rovo. That's the name that they've given to their MCP server. So we're going to, once we clicked on that, we're going to click on Rovo MCP server. And this is where we're basically going to get ready to add a domain. So coming back into our Bolt project, we're going to go to where it says connectors. Let's click on this. We're opening up, there's our connectors page, and you can see that JIRA is one of our pre-built, offered integrations or our connectors. So we can click directly on it. Notice that we also have the ability to add custom MCP servers as well. So, if you're using a different tool, such as like Monday.com or like Asana or something like that we haven't listed here. A lot of these tools have rolled out an MCP connector as well. So you can connect that by just by going into our custom MCP server. Notice that there are two different types of MCPs out there. So there's hosted, which is effectively when the company themselves, they will send out all of the information via something like HTTP or a server sent event. We can list these hosted MCP servers here, but if it's a local MCP server, we can't actually do that within Bolt. But it's very common that companies will have these hosted MCP servers. And the way that you can identify them is that when you're looking on their website, they will actually show that the URL starts with something like HTTP, or they will say it's a server sent event. Now, let's click on JIRA. Now, we're going to come in and we're going to click Connect. So some of these MCPs are really simple. It uses OAuth and it just is 1 or 2 clicks. Here for the Atlassian, for this JIRA connector, it's a little bit more complicated. So what we're going to do is it's just a simple 2-step process. What we're going to do is once we've clicked connect, it's taking us to the Atlassian Rovo MCP server page. Now, what I'm going to do is notice we've got this redirect URL. And so I'm going to copy this. We're going to copy that to our clipboard. I don't need Confluence, so I'm going to disable that. We're just going to go with JIRA. And now we're going to click approve. So once we've done that, it's taking us, and it's actually saying your organization administrator must authorize access from this redirect URL to this site. So that's where we come into our admin panel that we were just looking at before. Remember, in our admin panel, we came down into Rovo, we came into Rovo MCP server, and this is where we're going to click add domain. So I'm going to paste that domain that we just copied. Effectively, because I was the one who created the Atlassian workspace, I am able to add these authorized domains here. If you are working in a larger company and you're not the person who has set up the Atlassian workspace, then simply speak to somebody from DevOps and basically share this domain with them and ask them to add it as an authorized domain within the Atlassian administrator settings. So I'm going to click add. So once I've clicked add, now you'll notice that this has appeared here within domains. If I jump back into where we're authorizing, so we've added it in here. What I'm going to do is just refresh this page. And this time, because now we've added it, it's now removed that warning message and the accept button has become clickable. So now we're going to click accept. While we're waiting that to load, it's now authorizing the MCP server. And just like that, the MCP server is successfully connected and it's now routing us back to our JIRA board. And if I click on, if I open this project here, I may actually shrink this window. Hopefully it should be a little bit easier for you guys to view. Great. So now within Bolt, we see that JIRA has connected. It's got this connected pill along the side here. Now, what I want to point out is it has access to a whole variety of different tools. So basically, these are all the tools allowing it to access. You know, I just heard that we had a bit of a beep, so maybe it was an error message. So it looks like it had an error finishing this build. So I'm going to hit continue, and hopefully it should be able to finish building up this project. Sometimes if you do get an error building like this, notice that it has done a fair bit of the plan already. Just simply hit continue and it will continue working off from where all the progress it had made, so it doesn't need to reuse all of the tokens that it had used when creating some of this code. What I may do is I'm just going to reload this site. Let's retry again. I've noticed sometimes if you do get an error like this, it may error like multiple times consecutively. Just be consistent with hit, retry. Maybe by the third or fourth time, it'll then get working again. So here we go. We'll let that think. What I'm going to do just in the meantime is I'm going to go ahead and start off another project build. So let's come in here. I'm going to copy this. Let's paste this prompt in here. We will plan it out and we'll generate our plan. Let's come back in here and we'll try this one more time. We have been rebuilding our agent. So some of you may notice that we're using standard and max now as our Bolt agent. So we have had a little bit of fine tuning issues over the last week or two as with the rollout with that. So that's why you've been seeing errors. I know we had some errors in the workshop last week, but it's something that we're actively working on with our engineering team. So it's just a matter of time until we get that all ironed out. Okay, so we'll let that continue to build. Now, let's jump back in and so basically what we've done is we have enabled our connector. If we jump back in, we can see it's checking and JIRA is now successfully connected, which is exactly what we were looking for. Here are all the tools that I was going over. There's also something I want to point out that here in the settings is it automatically is enabled for new projects. Now, basically what that means is when you come and when you start a new Bolt project, once you click on connectors, notice how when I started this new Bolt project that the JIRA connector is by default enabled. Some of them are, some of them aren't, and that is based on this setting, whether you have that enabled or not. Now, what I like to do by default is I'll usually turn this off. So to do that, just click edit, and then you can toggle that once you've clicked edit, and then we hit save changes. And so basically that means it's not going to actually access your JIRA MCP server unless you explicitly ask it to. And that's just a good way to save tokens. Sometimes the agent may accidentally ask the JIRA agent, your JIRA information source to draw information from that. Sometimes it does that unnecessarily. So by default, I like to just turn that off to save that unnecessary use of tokens. So now, another thing I want to point out is to enable the connectors, you just come down here and you can simply toggle them on and off. I like to turn off the ones when I'm not using them, for example. So I'm going to turn all of those off. And now just JIRA is connected and you can see it's got that little green dot. Great, so that is building out now. While that's building, let's have a look at this one. This has finished the plan. So I'm going to go ahead. It's not asking us any clarifying questions. So I'm going to go ahead and hit implement this plan. So I know it can be a little bit confusing jumping back between both of these projects sometimes. So we've got our initial project, which is continuing the build, and then we've got our second project, which is building now. So let's have a look in JIRA itself. Now, we were able to add our first item here. Now, let's assume that somebody from our customer success team gets a call or an email from one of our customers and they say, look, the product is great, but it's missing this feature. This is where they come directly here and they can create a new ticket. They can also say, let's say, for example, add dark mode to the site. There we go, add dark mode to the site. I know sometimes we get questions on the dictation program I use. I use something called Whisper Flow. So I just hold function and I can dictate to my microphone and it will just auto fill some of these text box fields. So I'm going to hit add. Now I'm going to open this up. Again, I'm going to assign this to me. And this time I'm going to make the priority, let's say, it's low. And then also the due date, let's set our due date for tomorrow. So now we can add also a description as well. So on each of the pages, add the ability to toggle between light and dark and system for the appearance settings. So there we go. Now I'm going to save that. So notice not only do we have a title, but we have a description as well. So the more context that you can add in here as well is the better. Now let's also add a comment. Let's say this has been requested by a bunch of our customers. Now let's assume that our customers have basically, it turns out actually to be quite a high importance request. So we're going to save that comment and we're going to put that in there. So now let's come and let's move this priority. And we're actually going to say it's the highest because of this comment. Somebody has said we're getting this requested a bunch of times. So notice as we're doing this, we're basically slowly populating more information into this JIRA ticket. Notice that the ticket itself is labeled CAN 11. So there we go. We now have this is a highest priority item and our due date is tomorrow. So now anybody in our organization can start adding these items into our to-do board. Great. So let's jump back into our Bolt project. Let's see how this is going. This is building out. This is building out as well. So we're almost ready to progress. Let's jump back into our slideshow and jump back. Okay, so we've successfully connected our JIRA connector. Now, for those of you who may want to review this process, if you got lost a little bit, what we do is tomorrow, basically every Friday after the workshop, we post this workshop recording onto our YouTube channel. And so we'll also have a link to Google Drive where we'll have all of these slides. So if you do need to revisit exactly how to do this process yourself, we'll be going, you can simply review all of these slides by going to our YouTube, looking at our workshops playlist, and then you'll be able to find these slides in the description of this YouTube video. So now that we've connected that, let's imagine that our Bolts project has finished building. Now, here are some sample JIRA items that we may want to add. We've already added 2 of these. So here are some examples that I've already created. And now let's go ahead and add a few more of these. So say we want to add some scorecard ratings with side-by-side comparison. So what I'm going to do again is I'm just going to copy this. So scorecard ratings is what I'm going to add. So I'm going to copy this text. In case you're curious about what I'm actually building this with, this slideshow was built using Bolt, using basically a plugin called Slide Dev. It's a really simple way that you can build slideshows within your Bolt site. So, and you can actively change some of the text here using this side. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to add this as another ticket. So we're going to paste that in there. Let's come back and then here's the description. So I'm going to copy that. Jumping back into our JIRA, we're going to add that as the description. Great. So we're going to save that. Now what I'm going to do is I'll assign it to me and I'll make the due date. Let's say we'll make this for Friday. So there we go. So we've got 2 due tomorrow and we've got 1 due today. Now, I just heard a beep was done. So it sounds like one of these is finished. Here we go. Okay. So this is our very first build and we can see it's created our dashboard page. It's already populated the dashboard with a variety of different examples. We have if we click on we haven't actually built out the candidates page yet, but we do have the dashboard, which is working successfully. Let's see, are we able to drag one of these tickets? Nope, so we can't drag one of these items or tickets into a different status. So that's another example of something that we may be able to work on. But the whole point of this is to show you basically how we can bring some of these items in from JIRA. So let's come back in here. Let's make sure that our JIRA connector is enabled. I've turned off everything else. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use, here are some example prompts that we can use to query our, basically our JIRA knowledge base. So our first prompt where we're going to filter by due date. The Bolt prompt is using the JIRA connector. Simply, we're stating using the JIRA connector, find all of the tickets which are due today. Another example could be find all of the tickets which are assigned to William Sayer. Another one could be find all of the find all of the tickets which have the priority as critical. So because we've been using today as a good example, let's go ahead and we're going to use that example. So here we go. I'm going to copy that prompt, jump back into our Bolt project, and I'm going to paste that in using the JIRA connector, find all that are due today. So we've turned that on. Now, the important thing is I'm going to put it in plan mode, and I'm going to build this out. There we go. Now, the reason why I go plan mode is because I don't want it to act on any of this information just yet. I just want it to have a deep dive, look into JIRA and see what tickets are available. So with a little bit of luck, what it's going to do now is it's going to use this MCP connector that we just established. So effectively, the Bolt agent itself is going to do some of these tool calls. It's going to speak to JIRA, and it's going to be able to read what is in our Bolt shop. So it's basically, it's initially had an issue. So it's saying there are no JIRA tickets due today in your Bolt Workshops test workspace. So the first thing we want to do is have a look. We'll see that our Bolt Workshop test workspace is the actual workspace that we're working on. So Workshop test, maybe because the name isn't lined up exactly with what it's trying to query, could be a reason why it hasn't been able to find the tickets just yet. So let's put our detective hats on, and as I said, maybe it's trying to query the wrong workspace. So let's take it a step back, and we're going to ask, using my JIRA connector, determine which workspaces I have in my JIRA account. So we're going to take a step back. And actually, before we do this, is I'm going to copy this and let's clear the context. Now, the reason why I want to clear the context now is because it's already used up a fair bit of context creating this project from scratch and building out all of this. So what we're going to do is if we're going to start on some new feature development, let's clear the context so we have as much context available while building out. Think of it as like a runway. If there is a whole bunch of studies that basically say as your context window starts to fill up, the agent becomes less effective. A lot of people try and keep the context to about a third of like the total context size. We actually we don't show the exact context that's been used within Bolt, so it's kind of a bit of an art at the moment where you just need to kind of get the feel for it. But as I said, think of it as a runway. Think of it as like you're taking off a plane and you're not going to taxi your plane into the middle of the runway and then try and take off, where each of these features that you're launching is you effectively trying to get the plane airborne. What you want to do is you want to taxi your plane all the way to the very start of the runway so that you have as much time and as much space with your context window as possible when you're trying to launch each of these features. Great, so we've cleared the context. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that prompt we just created in plan mode, and we're making sure that JIRA is connected. Yep, and now we're going to see which workspaces are available in the JIRA account. Now, for those of you who are a little bit confused here, the Bolt agent looks like it's taken it on itself to actually populate the database with some of these. It's seeded the database with some of these example candidates. So we can simply ask if we wanted to remove those if we wanted to. Okay, so here we go. It's been able to find one JIRA workspace. So here we go. Now, please look into this workspace and determine which JIRA tickets are in this workspace. So there we go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to probe it for everything. Let's now get the agent to, hopefully it should be able to find some of these tickets that we've just been able to create. Okay, so let's retry this again. As I said, some of you may need to be patient. We have, with our agent, we have been, testing out new models. We've been trying to figure out the most efficient way to run it under the hood. So some of you, obviously, we had Haiku, we had Sonnet, we had Opus, and we were allowing users to basically choose which model they wanted beforehand. Now we're effectively auto routing. So depending on the complexity of the prompt, we're basically going to be managing a lot of that under the hood. So that's why we've got these standard and max models. Okay, all right, let's have a look. And it looks like our agent is able to find what we have created in our JIRA workspace, which is great. Now, notice it's actually saying that there are 4 tickets when we've only created 3, and that's because it's considering an epic also as a ticket. But we can see that within this type column that we've got an epic as well. So an epic is basically a way that you can cluster some of your projects or some of your features that you're building out. So I had created that ahead of time, so it may look like a bit of a surprise for you, but you can find those epics all here within the JIRA workspace as well. Within this space itself, we have these 3 tickets, and if we look, here we go. If we look, we can see those 3 tickets that we've created. Notice that what it's showing is it's found like a summary, it's got the priority, it's got the status, and it's got the assignee, but it doesn't have the due date. So one of the best practices that I can recommend is once you've been able to find some of these tickets here with the Bolt agent, is effectively doing like a double click on each of these tickets themselves. And so we're going to do that with the agent. Let's choose one of these. Let's come back into JIRA. We're going to find, okay, the one that we want to work on. Due today is this one, add an advanced filter to the candidates page. So let's actually look in here and notice, because it hasn't built out the candidates page just yet, maybe it's probably better for us to choose a different item. So notice that we actually don't have the ability to drag and drop these cards from one status into the next. So it's probably best that we create a ticket for that, and then we are able to. That's an example of one thing we may want to address. Also, maybe we can address this dark and light mode one. So, for example, can 11. So, if we wanted to say add dark mode to our site, simply what we do is we can ask it to look more into can 11. So using the JIRA connector, please find all of the information on JIRA which is available to you about the ticket called. Then we're going to say can-11. So there we go. And now we're going to click send. And effectively, by doing this, what we're doing is everything, not just what we see here, not just these few columns. We're actually going to look at all of the things that somebody has added. So we could have team, start date, reporter, whatever it may be, and all of the comments as well. Dark mode. Let's see. Notice that we've got a comment in here. The due date, the priority, things like this, and a description. So hopefully now the Bolt agent will be able, this is the project we're working on, we'll be able to bring out all of these details as well. So here we go, look at this, and there we go. It's been able to use this MCP tool call and effectively pull out all of these core details. Now, if you're working in just like a one-person team and all of this is in your head, then it can get a little bit confusing and it can get a little bit overwhelming. So that's why it really is best practice to use some sort of project management tool like JIRA or Linear, and also it allows other members of your team to add all of the information in here. And now you're not going to lose any of this information, because look, we've been able to see that the Bolt agent has been able to draw out all of this information itself. Now, the next step that I want to cover, which I have a slide for, is so here are some sample JIRA items that we've been able to add. So we've been able to do this. So basically, we prompted the agent in plan mode to basically extract some of those tickets from JIRA. This is the next step. So planning a feature now that we have all of that context of the JIRA ticket. So we've done step one. We've been able to pull the JIRA ticket into the Bolt agent, and it has all of those, all of that information that is required. Now, we're going to stay in plan mode, and we're going to ask the agent to analyze these requirements and propose an implementation plan, and not to build just yet. Then we're going to review that information and build. So here's an example prompt. So using the JIRA connector, pull ticket details from the example ticket. We actually just did this from my board. Read the full description, acceptance criteria, and any comments on the ticket. And then based on this context, plan out how you would implement this feature in our existing app. Cover the database schema changes, new tables, column relationships, the UI components needed, and how the filter bar should work across both Kanban and list views. So something I want to point out is this first part of the prompt is actually quite generic. So based on this context, it's effectively, this is a very generic prompt. Plan out how you would implement this. So you could effectively use this on any ticket, no matter what it is, except for this last part here. It says how the filter bar should work across both the Kanban board and list views. So that is kind of specific to the prompt in particular. But because you've already drawn out all of this context, you can actually use a fairly open-ended prompt like this, a repeatable prompt that you can use time and time again. So let's go ahead. We're going to copy this. We're going to copy the repeatable part. Here we go. So let's bring that into our project. So here we go. So remember, we don't need this part, the top part, because we've already done that. So based on this context, plan out how you would implement this feature in our app. Cover the database schema changes, new tables, columns, relationships, or the UI components needed. Now, because we're just doing something dark mode, it doesn't need a database. So I'm just going to remove that for now. So cover the UI components needed, for example. Still within plan mode, let's now plan out this feature. Now, basically, I just want to show a repeatable workflow that you can use. So we've been able to bring in all of the context from JIRA, and then we now have this fairly repeatable prompt that you're able to use. And then now the Bolt agent is actually going to be able to build this out, at least plan this out for now. So we'll let that do its thing. In the meantime, let's go back and we're going to jump back. Let's see some of our other sample JIRA items that we may want to add. So an analytics dashboard. So maybe add a dedicated analytics view in the sidebar, the step-by-step funnel chart showing the drop-off rates, candidates added over time, yada, yada, yada. We have, what else do we have? So candidate tags and advanced filters, scorecard ratings. These are all examples of like what other people in your organization or you yourself may want to add inside of JIRA. Great, so we're building that out and we're almost onto a really exciting next step, which we'll show you in a second. So we'll just let this finish building. Once it's finished the plan, we're now going to implement. Now, you're probably asking, why would you not just ask, can't you just prompt the agent to add dark mode to your site? And you can. I mean, it depends on the complexity of the ticket. So something like dark mode, where it doesn't need a huge amount of depth or details to build out, sure. I think that's something that you probably could have directly prompted within Bolt itself. However, if we come over and we're looking at some of our more complicated ticket items, and they may have a multitude of comments. For example, there may be people in your team debating how something could be implemented. Then a beauty of doing it this way is if you've got all of the comments here within Bolt. Oh, let's try this again. So yeah, say you've got a back and forth between members within your, within your team, and they're debating which is the best way we want to roll out this feature. And then eventually they kind of come to a conclusion by having all of that here within the comments within this JIRA ticket. The Bolt agent is also able to bring all of that as context, and it's able to kind of consider that when it's implementing the feature. So that is something that is, it's got a depth of knowledge to it. And that's kind of the beauty as your features get more and more complicated, rather than you having to re-describe everything, all the decisions that have been made in the comments here. That's something that the Bolt agent will have direct access to and can use that while planning out the feature. Another example that you can use within your team is, say you have like a brilliant idea and you really want to implement it. And instead of you just rushing the gun and thinking, okay, I'm going to jump into Bolt and I'm going to implement this straight away, what you could do is you could create a JIRA ticket about it, and you could send that off to your team, and you could say, hey, everyone, what do you think of this? Do you have any comments or any feedback? Do you have any things that we may want to improve it as well? And that's where your team can then add in some of these comments here into JIRA. And then you can use all of that. Once people have added their comments, come into Bolt, bring all of those comments in and say, implement this feature utilizing all of the comments that have been added as well. Okay, great. So let's jump back in. So it's building this out now. So it's adding, it's basically built out a plan. We'll let that build out. Now, another thing I want to point out, if we come back into our slideshow, is, let me just jump to that last slide, is, here we go. So effectively, these connectors, these MCP connectors, are a two-way channel. So not only can we pull information itself from JIRA and then use it in the Bolt agent as context, but we can actually use it to push information back into JIRA itself. And so a good example of a workflow that you may want to use for this is, let's say you've got something like Granola connected. So for those of you who aren't aware, Granola is a note-taking app where effectively you can turn it on for your meetings or your calls. And what it will do is it'll create a transcript of your entire meeting. And then afterwards, it'll create a summary of that. Now, one of the beautiful things about Granola is that they also have an MCP connector as well. And so if I come into my connectors, you can see here we are in Granola, it's connected. Here are some of the tools that it can do. It can list your meetings, it can get your meetings, it can get the transcripts. And so by doing this, what you can do is, once it's connected, is you can ask your Bolt agent to effectively, while that's building, I might just show you in another project how well it works. So let's just come into an example project that I have here. This is a project that I just kicked off yesterday with like a family friend. We're trying to build out a new website for them. And we actually had a call on Granola. And I said, look, instead of let's just having a call over the phone, what I want to do is I'm going to set up a Google Meet so that I can turn on my Granola, transcript, and then I can save some of these, some of the calls that we're actually having. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to turn on my Granola, and for example, let's say using our Granola connector, please look at the meeting I had with Jim yesterday and extract some of the keynotes from our call. So like that, with the Granola meeting connected, we just make sure that that's on. Now we'll put it in plan mode, and I'm going to turn that on. So effectively what it'll do now is do exactly what we ask. And now within the Bolt agent, it should pull out the transcript from that call, and it should find out all of the key pieces of information. Having some issues with this. Okay. Now, if this is something that happens with you, notice that we have like this error log here. What you can do is you can simply copy this message, reach out to our support team and paste something in like that. However, it's actually done a pretty good job, and it has implemented dark mode. Even though it's shown that it's created an error, it was able to implement light and dark mode as well. So there we go. Now let's jump. We've got an error here. I hope you guys aren't facing as many errors as I am at the moment. It's been riddling this workshop the last 2 weeks, unfortunately. But yeah, as I said, if you've got any issues, please reach out to support. We do our best to look into some of the issues that you have. So let's try one more time. We're going to hit retry. What I like to do is if I do run into issues, I'll just hit retry a few times. And usually by the second, third, or fourth time, here we go. Just like that, by hitting retry, now it's able to carry on with this. Okay, so now what it's going to do is, let's see, hopefully it should look in and find some information from our meeting, and we'll just let that plan away. Now, back to this workflow that I was talking about. Oh, I don't know why this resets every time. Anyway, this workflow that I'm trying to explain is effectively what we can do is we can use our Granola connector to pull in information from our Granola meeting into the Bolt agent. So again, we're doing the same process. We're pulling information using MCP from another data source into the Bolt agent. And then we're going to use our Bolt agent because, it's got, it can use, Opus 4.6 under the hood if it's a really complex task, or Haiku, or a different model under the hood if it's a really simple task. Effectively, what I'm going to ask the Bolt agent to do is condense all of these key speaking points from the meeting and effectively turn the transcript from this meeting into JIRA tickets. And then the magic of this MCP connector is it can do that two-way task. And because we now have JIRA connected to the Bolt agent, is instead of us having to manually create some of these JIRA tickets within the JIRA UI, what we can do is we can simply ask the Bolt agent to then push these JIRA tickets directly, or these tickets that we've created within the Bolt agent, and push them directly into JIRA. So I just heard a beep. Let's have a look. There is no record of a meeting with Jim yesterday. In your Granola notes, a few possibilities. So maybe it was looking in the wrong area. So sometimes this can be a little bit iffy. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just jump back into my Granola, and I'm going to say, I'm going to look in Granola itself. I'm going to find the exact meeting, the exact name of the meeting. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write that meeting in here. So I can see in Granola the meeting is called, and I'm just going to look in my Granola, call with Jim. And then please look again for it. There we go. And now we're going to send that off. So now it's going to have a look again. Sometimes you can prompt by saying, have a look at all of the meetings I've had within the last week. And it will, that's another way that it can filter for some of these meetings. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? I can see, Erica, you've been doing a pretty good job answering some of the questions that we've had in the chat.
Yeah.
I hope this is making sense to everybody. Great. Okay. I hope it's all making sense for everybody. Okay, so jumping back into this workflow. Now, this is just one example of where you can pull information from one data source, use the Bolt agent to kind of aggregate this data, and then maybe push it into another one. Another example, for example, you may have like you may be creating like a travel blog site, and you may have all of your information about your destinations in something like Notion. You can pull in information from Notion, And then, for example, you may have, a specific like context or something. So, for example, maybe your site is just specifically talking about travel destinations in Europe. Maybe you haven't built out travel destinations to other continents just yet. So what you could do is you could use, an AI agent to create, travel destinations in Notion. You can pull them into your Bolt agent itself. And the beauty of doing this middle step of where you're bringing that information into the Bolt agent is now the Bolt agent has the context of your external data source and also the code that it's been able to build or write within the project itself. So it has all of the understanding. Well, it pulls in the context that it needs within your project, and then also from your external data source. And effectively, prompt engineering is kind of evolving into more sort of context engineering. As we've seen our agents get better and better over the last few years, previously you'd need to say things like act as a senior software developer, or you'd need to give it a role. But we're finding more and more so that the prompt itself is actually becoming less and less important because the agent can do a better job. And so, as these prompts, I'm not saying use bad prompts, but what I'm saying is like as the agents get better and better, is it can usually infer what you mean, and it can these prompts have been becoming the agents been getting better at effectively acting on prompts that maybe in the past weren't so good. And the focus is now transferring on bringing in the correct context. So you need to decide what are the key pieces of information that I want to bring into my agent and how can I use those so that I have provided some information to so the agent can work with. All right. It looks like it's worked successfully this time. Here we go. So our call with Jim, we effectively did a current website analysis. So we were looking at the previous website. We looked at what his role is as the current website owner. We then look at some of what are the technical next steps that we want to build for this site. And so now that we've got all of this kind of here within the Bolt agent, let's actually try pushing this into JIRA itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the JIRA connector. Now, what I'm going to do is, based on this information, please add 5 new JIRA tickets into JIRA using the JIRA connector. So I'm going to turn that off plan mode, and I'm going to build that just for the sake of time. So obviously these are 2 very different projects. So this is, a cricket website. The other one was our hiring pipeline. But what I want to do is effectively show the process of pulling in, information from a meeting using your Granola connector and now aggregating this within Bolt, and then effectively what we should be doing is it should now add more tickets here into our JIRA site rather than us having to do this manually. Which pretty much pulls us to time. I might just wait until this finishes. Here we go. So I don't have access to a JIRA connector or any JIRA in my current environment. My available tools are focused on code editing. So let's just make sure. So we do have that green little dot. So sometimes we just need to rephrase this a few times. So using the JIRA MCP connector, you should be able to send information to our JIRA workspace. I'll put that in plan mode. Let's just see what it's able to find. Now notice we've had to be a little bit persistent with this. Again, we are still fine-tuning our agent. So its connection to some of these connectors is still something that we're working on, but it's definitely something that we've got engineers working hard on under the hood. So here we go. Let me explore the JIRA workspace to understand what's available. So we'll let this plan out. right. I can see Oren's got a comment. So JIRA off-platform project builder uses tickets, key, prevent context overload once loaded, work bidirectional, save tokens. Struggling to understand that, but it seems like, maybe, you don't need to bring in all of the tickets from JIRA. Perhaps you can sort of filter a little bit before bringing those into Bolt. Thanks for that, Oran. Here we go. So now it's looking through the JIRA workspace. It should be able to find some of this. We are probably introducing a little bit of confusion because we're doing it on another project. What I would suggest is having a new workspace for each of your different projects. So we can create a new one. We can call this Cricut workspace. Actually, we'd need to create a new one. So spaces. If we wanted to create a new one, we just come in here. We can use this template. We'd call it Cricut website. How's it managed? Team manage, access open. Sure. So we're going to hit this, and then we're happy with that. We can hit that. Let's just hit next. And done. Great. So now we've got our Cricut workspace and our workshop test as well. So let's look back in here. Here we go. So I now have a clear picture of the JIRA workspace and the meeting notes. Here we go. So we've got our call from Jim. We've got, now it's actually saying create an epic called IMC Cricut website. We're going to add a description as well. So this all looks good. Set the priority levels for each ticket, or would you rather say, yes, choose priority. 2, we're going to say, do you want me to include full meeting summary in the epic description? Sure, again, because we're trying to maximize the context that we want. Then, are there any other items you'd like me to, skip? Say, use, or say, create 5 from the meeting. We'll turn that off plan mode and let's build. Great, so now it's actually interacting directly with JIRA, and it should be able to create the epic that it was just talking about using all of the notes from our meeting. Great, okay, so that pretty much brings us to time. Let me see, I think we went through all of the slides. Let me just have a look. Here we go, just finally some best practices that we can cover. So acceptance criteria is really good for you to include in the description as well in the JIRA ticket. So this is very valuable. So basically, you're turning vague requests into testable outcomes. That's effectively what you want to do with the acceptance criteria. If you improve your tickets, you'll improve your prototypes. So the quality of the Bolt's output is directly proportional to the quality of the ticket that we've created. So well-scoped tickets with clear goals produce better prototypes and better outcomes. We also want to draw maximum context from the JIRA ticket. So when operating on a prototype, go back to the JIRA ticket like we did in with the Bolt agent, and we were able to pull as much context as possible from this ticket. So, before we just saw those 4 columns, and we actually asked double click on the ticket and pull out as much information as possible. Use plan mode before building. So this is a great way to understand what the agent's going to do, and then also make it a habit within your team so that you actually get people in your team to log things into JIRA or into Linear, whatever task management app you're using, and sort of become a habit so that almost acts as your universal source of truth. A great way that you can do that is another benefit why that's useful is you can come back in and you can ask your Bolt agent, you can say, look at everything that we've implemented over the last month, understand, the changes that you've made. So it almost acts as kind of like a project history within, and a good way to track everything, all the changes that you've made. Now, this can apply to other tools as well, like I mentioned, so Linear, Asana, Notion, and other tools as well. Great, so that effectively brings us to the end of our workshop. Now what it's going to do is it's just going to feed some of this into our JIRA board. I may just wait until the end so that we can see. Hopefully it should add some of these issues here into JIRA, so it shows effectively how to push items back into your tool as well. So we'll just let that work. What I'm going to say, a big thank you to Erica for being here on the call. So thank you, Erica. We didn't have a huge amount of questions today, but thanks for being here and thanks for helping us. Now, as always, your feedback is greatly appreciated for these workshops. We have every quarter, what we do is we give out a $500 Bolt voucher. So everyone who's left feedback for the workshops over that quarter, we effectively put all of those names into a hat, and we're able to pull those out, and we give one $500 voucher for bolts to one lucky winner who's left feedback. So it's also goes a long way to help us understand the usefulness of these workshops for you guys. So feel free in the Luma. I think it sends out an email just directly after or an hour afterwards the workshop. So yeah, feedback is greatly appreciated. And yeah, let's have a look. It looks like we've finished this last part here. So we've added some new JIRA tickets. So let's jump back into JIRA, Cricut website, maybe. Okay, here we go. So just like that, it's now been able to demonstrate that it's actually been able to push these items, these JIRA tickets that it kind of created from that meeting back into JIRA. And now we can effectively go through these one by one and implement them within the project. Now, I wouldn't recommend trying to implement all of these at once. Probably just go through one ticket at a time, pull in all of their context, and then implement them using your Bolt agent. So with that, thanks again for watching. I hope you've found this workshop useful. Next week, we've got an exciting week because we've got both the office hours on Tuesday, and then we've got another workshop on the Thursday. So I hope to see all of you guys then. Have a wonderful week. All the best building out with your projects. And thanks again for joining us today. And thank you, Erica, for being on our call. With that, we're going to say bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us, Erica. We'll say goodbye and see you guys next time. All right.